Hello everybody, and welcome to my very first watercolor video. Full disclosure, I have never formally been taught how to watercolor. I figured this all out with some advice from a friend and just trial and error. I've taken some drawing courses. I do have a BFA in design, so I understand kind of the basics of color and how they all interact, but when it comes to painting in any form, I've never had any training. So I hope you guys kind of hang in there with me as I figure out what I'm doing, and maybe you can learn from my mistakes and share any good advice you might have. I actually really consider not uploading videos because there's still so much I don't know. And I was really self-conscious, but I figured there might be some more people in that same boat that, someone who's really an expert at watercolors would be hard to relate to, so maybe someone watching my videos who is also learning can kind of see kind of that step in between very beginning starter and these really amazing professional illustrators who have years and years of experience at this. So as I make mistakes, I'll try and point them out so that other people can learn, and if there's something you see that I could do better or I don't know, just leave it in the comments. I would love to learn anything you guys have to offer. So on this first piece, I decided to do this very sunflower warm portrait, and I very rarely do blondes and I very rarely do curlier hair. So it was kind of a very wise choice for me to make my first video a whole lot of things that are out of my comfort zone, but I had this idea in my head and I really wanted to try it. At the very beginning of the video, you can see me kind of putting this stuff around the edge of it, and that's actually masking fluid I just picked up. I've never used it before, so we're gonna just kind of see how this goes. But if you've ever painted in Photoshop and you kind of lock a layer, it keeps you from painting outside the boundaries of that layer. And I kind of thought the masking fluid might work similarly and give me a nice separation between my foreground and my background. So I'm really excited to see how that turns out. As you can see, I've started really lightly because every advice I've ever heard from any other watercolorist is you have to start light and just add on the layers, because once you get to a certain point, it's almost impossible to back up. There's a few techniques, but it's never the same. So I'm doing my best to take my time. I am not the most patient person. So I think later in this video, you'll kind of see me become a bit impatient and start to add on heavier pigments. And there are some of these things that I'm a little bit better at than others, and I will struggle here in a minute when I start doing these flowers. I haven't actually painted a whole lot of flowers, so it was a new experience for me. Most of what I've done in the past has been portraits. So, I'm trying to push myself a little bit at a time to get out of my comfort zone and do more things. I actually have a BFA in graphic design, and I really love graphic design, but I had to focus so much on getting my degree that I stopped drawing. So I'm really rusty, and I am just so ready to get back into it. I got so much from drawing, and I don't know how I kind of got through it, considering I rarely ever picked up the pencil just to draw what I wanted to draw. It was always for an assignment. I guess I kind of got tunnel vision in college in order to graduate and succeed, because graphic design is usually a very competitive program, and my school was no exception. I was really excited right here when I started using this burnt umber, I think is the color, to outline it, because I still hadn't decided how I was going to outline my stuff. I really didn't want to use a black Copic marker because it's just so dark and harsh. And sometimes I really enjoy that aesthetic, but I wasn't sure that's what I was going for here. And even though I'd done a ton of color studies before actually starting, so I can get an idea of how I want to use color, I still hadn't made up my mind. But I had spent so much time, waiting to get started, I was just like, I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna figure it out. And if I make a mistake or it doesn't look perfect, I got to live with that and learn from it. And overall, I made a ton of mistakes all the way through this, and you may notice them, you may not, but kind of part of recording this is teaching myself that I need to live with those mistakes and that they're a normal part of the creative process. And even people who are really amazing, talented professionals who've been doing it for a really long time still make those same mistakes and have things they need to work on. So, you know, I'm not the only creative, I'm sure, that has run into this issue where you feel like something has to be perfect and you kind of get stuck. And once you realize you've made this mistake, you kind of want to start over or give up. And this is really forcing me to kind of push past that so that I can see if I can fix those mistakes or work around them or live with them and see how the final piece turns out. Because in the past, I would probably just stop. But since I'm recording this, there's a whole lot more that goes into it, and I'm just more committed to finishing the piece. And I think that's a really important thing to try and do. I know a lot of people will paint with, or not paint, but draw with pens in order to teach themselves not to use their eraser so much. And I guess this is a very similar thing I'm trying to do here, because watercolor has a mind of its own, like I've said, and it can be unforgiving. So compared to Photoshop, where you have Control-Z and like 50 lines of history where you can go back and change things, this is a whole new world and it's scary. And, you know, I'm really having to put myself out there, and I've said "and" a lot, so hopefully I'll get better at that too. While being a new watercolorist, I'm also a new YouTuber, so you're going to be seeing a lot of growth, hopefully, on my channel if you stay tuned with me. I was kind of starting to get really impressed with these flowers over here, but I did them in kind of a different style, so I was trying to make it blend in with the photo more, or not the photo, but the rest of the illustration. And I had planned on doing a nice background color, and I was looking at this photo with this illustration and wondering, do I really want to go in and put in a background? A lot of people would tell you you're supposed to actually do your background first, or at least do a wash of it, but for whatever reason I did not. And going around and adding a background to this seemed like really difficult, but I said screw it. Again, I'm doing this to learn and to get better, so if it ends up being total, you know, messes everything up, I will just have to live with it or learn to work around it. It's pretty intimidating to go in there and do, and you can see that I've already kind of like painted over some of my existing painting trying to put in this background. And at the same time, I was trying to not let it dry so I didn't have these weird edges, and really just trying not to freak out because I was trying to juggle all of this at once. So in the future, I might try and do the background first and see if that helps. I don't really know. I guess I need to do a little research and see how other people will go about it. But you know, once I got it on there, I was like, oh, you know, I really love the way this blue and these yellows kind of contrast, and you know, if I clean up the edges, maybe I can still make this work, because I was feeling a little sad about how I messed up and put blue over my existing artwork. But you know, determination, I went back and started to kind of correct any mistakes. There was one point where I actually put my hand in some of the blue that was still wet, and you can see that blue drop up there in the hair, and I was kind of like a tiny bit devastated, but I'd come this far. I was like, I'm going to see this through the end. By the time I started adding these little white details, I was starting to feel like the image was starting to come together, and I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to push past these things in the past that would just make me want to give up and end up with this really cute portrait. So I hope you guys enjoyed it too, and maybe learned from my mistakes. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.